How to legally pay no taxes. Possible. I'm at a point in my business where I need to start worrying about taxes. From what I've learned about IRS and IRC, the best way to legally pay no taxes is to either report zero net profit by balancing your expenses or open business in a country where there are no taxes. Setting up business in a country where there are no taxes makes taxation simpler, but complicates your legal obligations. For example, the Principality of Monaco charges no personal income or business taxes for most business types, but to be considered a resident, you have to live there for 6 months and 1 day out of the year, which is cumbersome. On the other hand, reporting zero net profit by balancing expenses is more generally applicable, but we are faced with the challenge of where to put our money, when there are no more inescapable business expenses. I was hoping you guys could provide, if any, and I believe to be in Monaco you need to first prove a certain level of wealth to get the status and benefits. Keep it in perspective, are you talking hundreds of thousands? Otherwise forget it. All the best for the new year. If you are in the UK and want to pay minimal tax, you just rename your company Google or Facebook. Seriously though, you should be seeking professional advice on reducing your tax liabilities, not relying on a public forum, even though many here will have had to go down a similar path. Also, there is the moral issue. It is one thing to want to reduce your tax burden, but quite another to want to pay no tax at all. That just makes you a parasite expecting others to pay into the collective while you just reap the benefits. If you are in USA, I agree with you in your view to not pay taxes, as taxpayers receive nothing in return, absolutely jack shit. But if you are in other more respectable countries that effectively use tax money, I beg to differ. And yes, this is a conversation you need to have with a tax professional, preferably 20 years of experience, perhaps Italian or Jewish. From my experience, they know the intricacies in the USA of how to get around things, and a trusting tax attorney. P.S. I hope the masses do not get butthurt about the races mentioned in this example. This is just from my experience, just one example out of the sea. Invest in professional advice. Wrong place to solicit that advice. I think you'll find the answer will vary widely based on your personal circumstances. This is why you won't find a one-size-fits-all solution with a Google search, and those gurus who are selling a single solution for zero taxes are setting you up. Speak with a professional, not me. I don't do international structuring. This made me literally laugh out loud. People say stereotypes exist for a reason, and I would not argue with them in this case. However, I've seen tax returns from some old Italian guys and one old Jewish lady this year. Seriously? She was like 90. Let's just say you need to make sure they include audit protection in your contract. Ultimately, you are responsible for the information on your return, even if someone else prepares it. So you know all those roads, and schools, and 911 service you enjoy so much? They all come from taxes. I suggest just paying taxes from a moral perspective. Now if you want to lower your taxes, I think that's a different story. Isn't this your department, lol? BTW, your emails have been quite the drivel on the government, ha ha ha. The only real way to pay no tax is to make no money. I don't have a problem paying taxes. I want to minimize taxes I pay, but believe I have benefited greatly from entrepreneurship in the greatest economic opportunistic system in the world. I have paid a lot of taxes. I literally just caught some things up and paid what would be the equivalent of more than a great salary. But that was for a few years of catch-up. I believe in what Kiyosaki said when he was facing a large tax bill. He just had to go make more. I see no ceiling in what I can earn. People ask me all the time about Amazon fees. Amazon fees? Who cares? It is only a percentage of what I make on Amazon. Same is true to a degree with taxes. I could be so blessed to have such a large tax bill. Means I am doing something right. So, taxes? You're worried about taxes? Go make more money. Go pay an accountant to handle your tax strategy. There are a few on the forum whose whole existence is to avoid taxes. Personally, I'd rather live on the Gulf Coast of Florida and pay some taxes than live in some third world shithole but be tax-free. To each his own. To me, taxation has the moral profile of a back alley mugging. But as I've gotten older I've come to understand three things, not exactly deep philosophy, but I'm on team on this one. Same for living where I want to live, not based on tax rate. I agree. As long as you are in a low tax state, the benefits of being able to conduct business from the USA currently outweigh the costs of doing business here. Taxes. Hire a good accountant and do everything you can to minimize your tax burden legally. Why? Because why look over your shoulder? Now, even though I have this view, of just take care of it, I am about the most anti-taxation voter on the face of the earth. I view the government with similar disdain that I would an organized crime ring. An organized crime ring might have slightly more ethical morals than the people in office today. That being said, I always pay my dues to Uncle Sam. All of my life I've done my own taxes, but 2019 will be different. I'll have to start hiring an accountant to take care of it because I'm started to get confused with what can be written off and such with the different income streams I have. I'm curious, how much do you guys recommend I put down for budgeting an accountant for 2019? It seems to be a range of 1K to 2.5K, which usually pays for itself in the tax write-offs they can find. Does that sound right to you? Taxation is a necessary part of modern life. I agree that tax money can be and often is misspent, which can lead you to look at reducing your tax payments. But looking at paying no tax whatsoever is frankly pretty disgusting. Do you use public roads, hospitals, schools, fire and police departments? Who do you think pays for these services? I'm highly biased, but you can get some good quality tax advice in that price range. I had actually meant to tag you on this post to get your inputs. Trust me, they do. Believe it or not, these criminals have done way more for their immediate communities than any government has ever done. I don't know if that's fair. Okay, so the ability to live in a safe country, military spending money for when you're old and can't work, social security, the treasury, the guys who print the actual money you use, steps of agriculture, making sure your food is okay, education, K-12, scientific foundations, NASA, etc., health foundations, Center for Disease Control, etc. Don't know why the US has the taxation system, but it's certainly not the worst. I mean, I lean toward libertarianism, but still to say we don't get jack shit for our taxes. Yeah, I don't think that's accurate. I mean, if you want a low tax rate you can go move to Zambia or Botswana, but you'll see that you get way less in return as well. Lately your beloved government continues to waste billions of dollars on irrelevant tomfoolery, and unfortunately Americans are paying for nothing in return. If you listen to Xpan you will see where your money is going, and it ain't going to schools, roads, public services. Maybe 20 to 30% tops. Rest is overinflated charges and boondoggle projects that are due to pissing contests. Social security? Joke. Any millennial will not get squat from this joke of a program. We will see how this becomes by 2030. Let Aileen 2050. Department of Agriculture is a joke. Please look up the list of foods that the EU has banned that are still legal and idiotically produced in USA. USDA and the FDA are both jokes. Education ranks are not where you would like or think America should be across English, maths and sciences. An American high school diploma will not even get you a seat in community college in Germany, for example. NASA. Another story. PS edit. I apologize for some misspellings. I am typing this on my phone where the set language is Norsk, not English. Also what I meant was that Americans that are not entrepreneurs pay a lot for almost nothing in return. People that I know that are engineer and doctors get taxed more and more living in NYC, Frisco, DC etc. If you factor in city plus state taxes, it is greater than countries in Western Europe, and they don't have free healthcare, childcare, education etc. etc. It is blasphemous. And in Norway and Germany the tax is high, but so much more is returned to the people. Great healthcare and free education in places where yes there is low population Norway but also moderate population Germany. The USA, albeit having 320 million, has enough money circulating, but a lot of it is held up due to corrupt practices and the corrupt government that continues to spend like no other, causing hardship to many others. Back on topic, boys. What you're getting into is a rabbit hole that goes deep. If you're serious about tax mitigation strategies, want to make sure you're doing it correctly so you don't walk around with a target on your back, and have the cash to invest, I'd advise you speak to Cheers. I keep laughing at the well what about roads? Ha ha ha. Okay, but seriously guys, there is nothing wrong with an individual wanting their payments to the government to be nothing, especially when they are starting from nothing. Being obligated to pay taxes by a monopoly on the use of force is actually shitty, just admit it. Even if it be necessary in some form to ensure your country's continued existence. Defense. That said, step 1 is income. Keeping 100% of your money by some convoluted trick that takes all of your time. Nets you nothing if you're not making anything. Make some income the normal way, I mean, by creating capital assets and renting or selling them, and step 1.5 hire a CPA. The first time I used a CPA he charged me something like $400 for a business and personal tax return. He saved me $8,000 that year. Later you'll need to do research and maybe find other CPAs and tax lawyers to uncover legitimate strategies, but don't put the cart before the horse. For out of the country strategies, keep a few things in mind. 1. You'll probably never pay no tax. Their government runs on something, and someone pays for it. Best case, maybe it's an indirect tax on higher order goods, and so you don't have to think about it. 2. Property rights. If you incorporate in the new kingdom of outer space, it goes almost without saying that you'll have nobody looking after your rights. So either invest in lasers, or just pay the taxes and fees in the jurisdictions where you need your trademarks, copyrights, property ownership, etc. acknowledged. Yes, it's a protection racket, sort of, but where's your army? 3. I'm being silly, but it's also true. Own a hotel and live in the penthouse. Think of the write-off '(s.) vehicle, food, servants, recreation, travel, home. This gets you about as close to only taxed on what you retain as possible. A moral dilemma? My moral dilemma is that my taxes are going towards building bombs, bombing other countries, killing innocent people, and feeding the parasites that never worked and never paid taxes. Superb. Spot on. Parasites. The ultimate synonym for the US politician. Well said, sir. They do not create any value, yet they are above. We create value and yet we owe them? Somewhere this logic is flawed. This varies so much by country and business model, that there isn't any good general advice. You need to hire an accountant. And one that specializes in offshoring, since most accountants have a very basic understanding of it. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that you probably need to be in the top tax bracket and paying $30 in taxes for it to be worth the time, money, and hassle. Offshore specialists aren't cheap. Good point. Build your lifestyle into the business, so that things you might perhaps pay for as an individual are legitimate expenses. Doesn't work with everything, but some are even protected in the tax codes this way. Funny thing I learned about taxes: in Alberta, if you buy a Ferrari or Lamborghini, you pay 5% sales tax on the car, So $400,000 car.I.E would be $20,000. And if you head to British Columbia, we pay a luxury tax of 15%, $60,000. Asked about that at a dealership. Heard of people leasing and doing tax write-offs on these cars. Random post but somewhat related, lol, gotta learn about stuff like that. Florida is a third world shithole. Emoji 23 sent from my VTRL 29 using tape.Talk. Yes, sent from my VTRL 29 using tape.Talk. Ironically, none of those are funded by income tax. Sent from my VTRL 29 using tape.Talk. What is funded by income tax? Sent from my SMG 960U using tape.Talk. Interest on government debt, military spending and social services are the biggest categories. Sent from my VTRL 29 using tape.Talk. Here in Canada, my income taxes support people scamming welfare or disability and refugees. So are we getting political here? Worth noting, nitty detail point, interest on government debt includes bonds that are used to build roads. So if the income tax doesn't directly pay for roads, and each state could potentially be different on this, for states with an income tax, then it may roads through bond issues, which are then paid back using income tax. Taxation is theft. Plain and simple. It's getting to the point where the government takes almost twice what you do. Let's say you make $100,000 a year and live in California. You're self-employed selling on Amazon. Then here's how your income taxes look: $62,700. That's what you really made. Now, you go out and spend that money. You're taxed an additional 7.25% sales tax. $58,145 of buying power. That's what your six-figure income really gets you. Meanwhile, here's how much the government makes. Let's say you did $300,000 in revenue, and your product costs were roughly $200,000. With the new 10% tax on China, you're paying 15% import tax on average. So $93,752. That's the amount of money that you created for the government. Meanwhile, you have $58,145. For every $1 you made, the government took in $1.62. If that's not effed, then I don't know what is. The American Revolution was ignited by taxation without representation, more specifically a few taxes that the colonies were expected to pay in order to recoup first or third of the cost of the French and Indian War, a war the British had to pay to protect colonists. Do you know what the taxes were at that time? How high did taxes go in order to piss everyone off to the point of telling Britain to go FCK itself? 1 to 3%. 3% if you were more in the South. 1% if you were more in the North. Now, we've gone on to accept the numbers above as standard. It's a new form of slavery. Except now, the master has thrown in enough math to confuse the masses. To answer your original question, as said, if you make money, you have to pay taxes. However, if you put nothing back in your pocket, then there are ways to get around paying taxes and instead investing in your business. Product businesses that average under $1 million in annual revenue are allowed to use cash-based accounting. So, it's to your benefit to empty your books as much as possible end of every year. An easy way to do this is to purchase a lot more product. December 30th is when you should be sending as many wires as possible overseas for purchases and stocking up for the new year. You repeat this year over year. Your bank account doesn't grow, but your inventory levels and balance sheet does. Finally, when you cross the $1 revenue threshold, that's when you hire an accountant to take it a step further, or start paying taxes. At $1 in revenue, you should have enough margin even post-tax to pay yourself handsomely. Or, you might want to create different businesses for different segments of your business, continuously reinvest, and then when ready, sell off the business for a significantly lower capital gains payment. Love this. This changed substantially with the new tax law. I believe the threshold is now $25 million for cash basis. I know you're being facetious, but in case anyone reads this and thinks it's how it really works, the benefits from the corp to you would most likely be taxed as income to you. Although, it's not income tax, it's still a revenue stream. Here's the breakdown of the fuel tax on a gallon of gas purchased in Missouri, USA. So, about 35 cents per gallon is extracted for federal and state usage. He has spoken the truth. You hear the truth, folks. Happy New Year's, lol. Lol, you guys make me laugh. We pay around $4.90 in tax for a single UK gallon of petrol gas. Does the money go to building your country and its people? If so, taxes shouldn't be an issue. If it's like in my country, a gang of high-ranking officials get it then spend it gambling, then screw them, find a way to legally not pay. Just my opinion. Yeah, your European governments take the cake for parasitic scum thugs. If I lived in the UK, my only plan would be how to before the state found an excuse to arrest me for something I said. I got stabbed by street scum who wouldn't get arrested, or I got blown up by terrorists. But, on topic, look up Nomad Capitalist. He's a specialist in what you're talking about. It always fascinates me how people from other countries see the UK from the outside looking in. The US only ranks one place above the UK in the World Happiness Report, and we both only just scrap into the top 20. It's one thing to want to pay as little tax as possible, quite another to trade money for happiness. What I find most strange though is that 7 out of the top 6 places in the Happiness Report are some of the coldest countries to live in, mostly Nordic countries. And they rank at the top pretty consistently year after year. They also have some of their. Personally, I loathe the cold and short days. Preach, brother. Sent from my VTRL 29 using tape.org. Well, taxation was there in the Middle Ages to finance the aristocracy in exchange for protection. Nothing really modern. In some countries like France, it's become quasi-slavery for the state. When your body and brains are taxed so much, it's a new form of slavery, since your labor and fruits of it aren't even your own, but are used to finance a bureaucratic class. There are modern-day parallels to this, with taxation partly financing the government to provide emergency services and militarized defense. Paying a little taxes is a good thing, man. That's what banks look at. I don't think that inventory is counted under this. If you count inventory purchased on a wire sent on December 31st, then wouldn't you need to add that inventory into your COGS calculation on that day? Yes. I think you're talking about two different accounting methods. Cash is the former, accrual COGS is the later. You have to pick one. You can't expense $10,000 in product and then again add it later as a COGS expense. MJ hit it right on point. They're two different forms of accounting, cash-based accounting being extremely favorable to businesses in a growth stage and why larger corporations can't use it. Here's an extremely simplified video, but it captures the general gist. You can plan ahead and minimize your tax liability while maximizing your growth. To add on to this point, here's why these accounting methods matter. Note: this is primarily for other users, since I'm sure already gets this. Let's say you make 50% returns cash on cash per year. Under a system where you're reinvesting everything, here's what you make using each accounting method. Year 10, you decide to stop investing and cash in. $3,844,336 50% equals $1,922,168 in profit. You leave this amount in your account, reinvest the rest in inventory, so this is the only amount taxed. Taxed at, let's say, even half. You're left with $961,084 in take-home profit. $1,756,808 50% profit margin equals $878,404. Your tax rate is still super high. Let's say 40%. Your take-home is $527,042.40. Obviously these examples are extreme, but they hit the point home. If you're reinvesting in your business, you should not be paying taxes on that amount that stays in the business. You should be paying on the amount that you take out and utilize, meanwhile allowing the investment fund to keep growing without taking a hit. Hopefully I didn't miss anything. Yep, that is why I said this. But, a hotel would be a very tax-advantageous business to own. You have to admit. So in the cash scenario, I'm still not quite understanding. Let's say I start with $0 and on credit buy $1,000 in widgets. I sell it all for $2,000. Now I have $1,000 in my bank account on December 30th and no inventory at all. I have realized a $1,000 profit, correct? Scenario 1: on December 31st, I decide to buy another $1,000 of inventory with the $1,000 in my bank account and instantly receive the inventory. On Jan 1st, my business has $0 in its bank account and $1,000 in widgets. Scenario 2: I do nothing on December 31st. On Jan 1st, my business has $1,000 in its bank account and no inventory. In my mind, my business still made $1,000 and I will be paying taxes on the $1,000 come April 15th. Are you telling me that this is not the case? Are you saying that in scenario 1, my business made no money? In your example it seems like you are saying that the money you use for inventory is counted as an expense and therefore lowers your taxes for the year. I don't believe that is correct. You can't just buy inventory to reduce your profit for the year. Inventory is an asset and not counted as an expense. There are literally dozens of countries in the world where you can live and pay no or minimal taxes on production. And most of them are far from being shitholes. In Europe alone there are multiple options: Malta, Cyprus, Monaco, Andorra, Portugal, to name a few. Hong Kong, one of the greatest cities on earth, doesn't tax income from outside Hong Kong for either individuals or businesses. So yes, you can even live tax-free in the Asian equivalent of NY or London. The media government complex does a great job of convincing Westerners that life outside the borders is cruel, uncivilized and dangerous. Of course they do. Their fleecing operations depend on keeping the farm animals inside the gates. Yet that's far from the reality. Whenever I travel to the US or back home to the UK, which no longer feels like home to me, it feels like I'm entering an open-air prison. I think the worst had to be waiting in line at passport control at Newark, being herded down the line like sheep for hours while being force-fed a CNN propaganda from omnipresent TV''S. In both countries, the constant indoctrination is palpable everywhere, which is something you just don't see in most places. I didn't really notice it before I left. Yet neither country had an income tax at all, until the early 20th century. An ordinary person would almost never interact with the government at all, or even care about them or who was in power. Supposedly taxes are the price of civilization, but I struggle to see how the West was civilized after World War I than before it. If you ask me, taxes and acceptance of their legitimacy are the biggest evil in the world right now, because they make all the other great evils possible. Truth is, when the Berlin Wall fell, communism didn't die with it, it just moved west. The 21st century, when it fully arrives, will look very different to the world we have today. Governments, especially democratic governments, will always trend towards taxing and controlling as much as they can possibly get away with. And for most of the 20th century, they had the perfect conditions for it: manufacturing-based industry which is rooted to one place, little to no competition outside the borders, and a compliant citizenry who didn't have the internet to offer alternative views. Yet most work now is knowledge work, and geography provides few to no barriers anymore. Global mobility is available to anyone with a brain who wants it. Smart governments understand that, and offer incentives to the best and brightest to go and live there. Those countries become much richer, quickly, As a result, the big Western governments now look like very much the cranky senile uncle, demanding that things be one way even as reality says something else. Think that wealth, prosperity and security is still going to be there in 20 years. I don't want to be anywhere near Western Europe or North America in 20 years. It gives me no pleasure to say that, but I truly believe we'll be the new Latinos or Eastern Europeans or Indians, leaving home to seek better opportunity elsewhere. Better to get a head start now, before they close the gates to the masses. Every factor that made Western civilization great either no longer exists, or is being killed off as we speak, usually by those same governments who want all your money. Superficially, it looks the same, but it's not the same civilization you grew up in. And only inertia is keeping it alive. On a practical note, I'll be moving here later in the year, to Limassol, Cyprus. Total shithole, right? Or not? I earned more money last year than I've ever earned before, living in the UK. And I'm on track to make 5x plus more this year. And I get to keep all of it. Every cent is mine. But do you know what the greatest gift of leaving the gates is? It's not the money. It's peace of mind. It's all the forms I don't have to fill in anymore. It's the extortion demands that don't arrive in the mail and make me angry. It's being completely detached from all the political bullshit and knowing I don't have to care anymore. It's being able to do basically whatever I want and being left alone without worrying about traffic cops, the law, or omnipresent CCTV. It's knowing I can speak my mind on any topic at any time and not having to worry about there being consequences. And it's knowing my future is no longer tied to the fortunes of a slowly collapsing civilization. It's also easy to meet some really great and interesting people when you live in a tax haven. Every single one of my friends here is some kind of entrepreneur and some shade of libertarian. I didn't plan it that way. It just happened. I didn't know anyone like that back in the UK. There's also nothing that says you have to live in a place 12 months a year. You just have to live there long enough to be tax resident, and you can spend the rest of the time wherever you want. Perpetual travel doesn't appeal to me either, but living in 2 or 3 countries throughout the year is my eventual plan. Talk to. He'll hook you up. I always find it a very convenient coincidence that those happiness reports are basically an advertorial for social democracy. There are shitloads of Swedes and Danes here fleeing the same. Biased sample I know, but none of them have a good word to say about Scandinavia, the level of happiness there, or its future. I think the high level of happiness has more to do with the low crime rate and high quality infrastructure. Yes, as you say, it's not really a sample. It is a group of individuals who are dissatisfied with their lot, otherwise they wouldn't be in Malta so heavily skewed against their mother country. So we can discount them as exceptions and certainly not a representative sample. I know by your username you like to play devil's advocate, but to say that a report is basically an advertorial for social democracy without some solid foundations to back up that statement is ridiculous. Not everything in life is a conspiracy to keep mankind in his hierarchical place. Not everything is related to the Freemasons, Bilderberg, the Illuminati, and the Black Pope. It's like Gogetter's post a poisonous opinion without any quoted form of credible facts, most probably based on tabloid press and sensationalist news coverage. Yes, you will get arrested for incitement if you are encouraging, instigating, or threatening racial hatred, terrorism and homophobic views, etc. And do you know what? I actually sleep better at night knowing those laws exist, as do a lot of other people. I certainly don't fear I am going to be arrested because of them. Why would you? At the moment we have a spike in knife crime in certain major cities. In the main due to the fact that we don't have huge numbers of guns on the streets. However, it has to be taken into context. Although knife crime is on the increase after years of falling statistics, it's relatively unusual for a violent incident to involve a knife, and rarer still for someone to need hospital treatment. Most violence in the UK is caused by people kicking, hitting, shoving or slapping, sometimes during a coherent fight, but most often when drunk. Alcohol abuse being a true British failing. On the subject of terrorism, we have faced terrorism here in the UK since the 70s. However, again, the probability of dying in a terrorist incident is minimal and falls well below countries such as the USA and France. Oh, and I do agree with you on a lot of what you wrote in your post. That's true. It's also the case that when the official evidence doesn't jive with anecdotal experience and what you can see with your own two eyes, it's usually because someone's trying to pull the wool over your eyes. The World Happiness Report is created by the Sustainable Development Solutions Network and the Global Happiness Council. From the SDSN website, the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network (SDSN) has been operating since 2012 under the auspices of the UN Secretary-General. SDSN mobilizes global scientific and technological expertise to promote practical solutions for sustainable development, including the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals (SDGs) and the Paris Climate Agreement. From the GHC report, it's no accident, for example, that the Scandinavian countries routinely top the list of happiest countries in the annual World Happiness Report. These countries are prosperous, healthy, and trusting, corruption is low, generosity is high. Individuals feel empowered to make key life choices. The social welfare state limits the inequalities between wealth and poverty, and delivers public services to all citizens. The rich do not run politics. On the other hand, in some other high-income countries, the happiness ranking is far lower. Wealth may be high, but the wealth is accompanied by an excessive inequality of income, wealth, and political power. Trust, as a result, is often reduced by high inequalities of income. And, inequality not only creates suffering among those left behind, but also adds considerable social and political stresses to highly unequal societies. To achieve social inclusion, governments must act as an instrument of the common good, rather than as a source of power for one faction or group within society. When parts of society are deprived of power and prosperity, not only do those particular groups suffer, but society as a whole is inevitably destabilized. So the agenda becomes clear. Does the agenda invalidate their report? Not necessarily. Should their agenda make you suspicious of its findings? Damn right. As a good Swedish friend of mine said on this very topic, it's not that Sweden is a happy country, it's just that they've been demoralized into settling for less. There's a concept in Scandinavian society called tall poppy syndrome, which basically boils down to it being socially unacceptable to rise above the average in any way. So as far as I can tell, Sweden is a fine place to be if you want to be a completely average person with an entirely routine and unremarkable life. Otherwise, perhaps not. I'll just leave these here. Agree with your bolded point, mostly. I can describe how the air, the energy, the vibe, feels different outside of the UK or similar countries. More open, more free, people are happier and focused on their own lives and their families rather than whatever empty political platform or cause they're hooked on this month. Could I give you any facts about that? Nope. It's just something intangible that I can sense. The only place I've ever felt unsafe was in a certain ghetto in Paris I accidentally wandered into. And I grew up in London. So yes, I agree with avoiding hyperbole. What I'm really interested in are the trends. Is the UK becoming more or less free? More or less socially cohesive? Does it have a brighter or darker future? I know what I think about that, but I don't have a crystal ball. All I know is that I've lost little and gained massively by leaving, even if my predictions about the downfall of the West never come true. All said and done, I'm not trying to spark or engage in any kind of debate here. I'm simply painting a picture from my experience that I hope will help people facing a similar decision make a more informed choice. Some of it will be factual and some of it will naturally be subjective. But everyone has to make their own choices. Why not pay your taxes? Why are we encouraging a crime in this forum? Blows my mind how some people on this forum are so ignorant on taxes and what they do and what privileges they get out of it. Believe it or not, entrepreneurship is a privilege. Be glad you have the opportunity of a capitalist system. Perhaps, you'd like to work 12 to 16-hour days of backbreaking work for crumbs in some poor country. I grew up in Denmark and spent the majority of my life there. Even though I love the country and the taxes I have paid gave me a lot of great things back like free education, free healthcare etc. Then this happiness report is in my opinion pure bullshit. Yes, the 3 to 4 weeks of summer we usually have is amazing and everyone is happy, but people in the winter time look so depressed. I was one of them for many years. Not sure what the happiness report is built on, but I really cannot understand why we keep ranking in the top year after year. Can it be the low crime rates? Seriously doubt it. After living 2 years in Moscow I returned to Copenhagen, Denmark this summer. I live in a pretty good area, and on the same night I returned a man was gunned down in the street next to mine. The whole summer there were shootings almost every day in Copenhagen. In comparison I almost did not see or hear of any violent crimes in Moscow throughout those 2 years. Nevertheless, I love Denmark and think it was the best place for me to grow up. But times has changed. Even though I would love to live there again someday, I just know that there are better places for me as an entrepreneur to live and raise a family. This is why I don't get why Scandinavian countries rank so high. I suffer from SAD although self-diagnosed and truly hate the winter months even in the south of England. I think I would jump off a bridge if I lived in Sweden or Denmark. I don't think the surveys are bullshit. They just focus on areas in society that maybe we as entrepreneurs don't necessarily correlate with. I also think that, apart from a slight rise in anxiety at the time of the incident, most people do not worry overly about being shot or killed unless they have been directly affected, or are in a social group where this is a real threat. Youth gangs, narcotics, crime etc. When I posted the report it was more about how taxation for the general public does not seem to be a factor in reducing happiness. In fact the ability of high taxation to fund free health, education etc. seems to be a positive. I spent some time in Egypt the year after significant unrest. The people in Cairo that depended on the tourist trade were devastated. A tour guide who specialized in guiding English-speaking tourists was telling me that pretty much only the Brits were visiting and Americans had completely abandoned the country. That was 70% of her business. It was probably due to the fact that the Brits had become accustomed to terrorism after decades of conflict with the IRA over Northern Ireland. I didn't feel any fear or threat, but then I wouldn't have seen it coming most likely. Is the UK becoming more or less free? I think the whole world is becoming less free. I see little cohesiveness in the UK, and the issues around the country being pretty much equally split on Brexit further erode this. I don't think the media help and there seems little to no trust in politicians. If I were single with no children I would certainly move to different countries. Domiciled in several countries is a very attractive proposition. It wouldn't be just for tax purposes however, and it certainly wouldn't be further north regardless of what statistics suggest. Lol. Yeah, you're right. The UK is on the up and up, so is Europe. Terrorism will slowly peter out and become a thing of the past. The state arresting people for speech or thought crimes never ended badly and will fade out rather than accelerating. Your kids have a bright future. The tax rates are completely reasonable for peacetime. The crime is just transient, and if it doesn't fear of the commensurately growing surveillance state is for people who have things to hide, it's just as bad everywhere else, and the weather will stop being shit. Let me guess which generation you're from. It's the previous one, right? The one that created us millennials? I.e. the worst, most destructive, self-indulgent, and antisocial generation that ever graced the West. The future annihilators? The we know best tisk-tiskers who actually know nothing? Of course you're all happier in your country. despite how shit it is versus a few dozen that aren't on that list. To say otherwise would be to, in a way, admit you're wrong about something you think, which simply will not do. One more aggressive defender of conventional wisdom slowly in a destructive force for the ignore list. Do go down with that ship and don't dare pipe up and question the status quo. Hopefully it sinks fast so we don't have to watch too long. The only thing your generation has going for it is that it'll be gone before ours. Is that all you have got? Location various, what does that mean? Where are you from? Where do you live now? What experience do you have of the UK? How long have you lived here? I will tell you one thing, the older I get the more I realize how much there is that I don't know. However, when I was in my teens and 20s I thought I knew it all because my experience of life was so much smaller. Oh, and I was also angry at the world back then, for reasons I still haven't fathomed out. Sorry, had to wade back through all the crap that accumulated here to get to your post. I didn't double check the numbers, sorry, not the time of year for me to be doing that. But I believe you have the essence correct. The trouble people run into is they elect cash basis, and as they grow, they have to spend increasing amounts at the end of each year to lower their income and tax burden. This usually creates a cash flow issue, especially if your sales are Q4 heavy like a lot of Amazon guys. It could also create a large reversal in some year when you are no longer able to use cash method. This reversal would cause you to show massive income, almost all of which will be taxed at the highest levels considering the numbers we're talking about. The other issue is when you go the bank and want funding, you show $0 profit. The banks always request tax returns. You may be able to talk your way around this one in the current lending environment, but I imagine lending will tighten up again soon if the economy falters. It is correct with the new tax law if you are a cash basis taxpayer, under certain scenarios. 1. Inventory can be treated as non-incidental materials and supplies too. Your tax treatment can conform to your financial accounting treatment of inventory. I paraphrased here so, if your financial statements are cash basis, and you are under the $25 million average revenue threshold, then your tax return can theoretically be cash basis as well in respect to inventory expenditures. It should be noted, we in the tax community are still awaiting guidance on some of these changes, so this information could be inaccurate as soon as I post. Always check with your tax accountant or CPA has that for a disclaimer. Either way, my recommendation is to use accrual for tax and financial accounting if you are doing any serious retailing or wholesaling. The biggest benefit under the new law is the exemption from UNICAP or 263A, which many CPAs don't bother to do anyway. And we pay to protect them. They spend almost nothing on military. Your US tax bill depends on the type of business that you're in. I've been in real estate for the last 43 years. Now I'm in the residential rental sector. I provide low to moderate income housing for my community. Yes, it's a pain in the %$ to manage. My tax bill is offset by my depreciation. It's that can kick down the highway. Yes, I will have to pay taxes on that depreciated income stream when I sell my properties. And I have seen people get upside down on those taxes due. But, it's a hell of a deal in the meantime. Why should they? They don't cause any problems around the world for the sake of a few greedy bastards that take money from American businessmen and hardworking proles to fund their games. They don't need a military like America. America needs a military now more than ever because they are the biggest shit stirrers in the world. The scumbags in DC need troops to protect their asses. Anyway, back to the op post. I hope the op gets some good counsel from reputable professionals in both the legal and accounting realms. Hey young guy, as long as US protects them, they can spend their money on social programs. I guess you've never heard of World War I or World War II, or the USSR, or the Iron Curtain, and those are just recent threats. I'm sorry you are negative on the USA. Us old folks have paid in blood to give you and yours a good life. Sorry you don't know what you have. I say what I say, sir, because my family has lost and shed blood as well in both Vietnam and Iraq. Two of the most despicably useless wars. Do I need say more? The last meaningful war the US has ever fought was, like you states, World War II. The world is grateful for this, but after that, please. Korea, Vietnam, so-called BS Cold War, Gulf War, Somalia, Afghanistan, Iraq. All flat-out rubbish. This thread, millennials, boomers, terrorists, depression and happiness indices. Ha ha ha, my gosh, I agree about especially Afghanistan. Several countries have been there before us and it's all ended the same way. It's a bottomless pit. Korea and Vietnam are interesting choices for you to bring up. I lost a bunch of friends in Vietnam. I too don't believe in perpetual wars. Sometimes we must go in, then we should then get out quickly. I understand your anger about paying taxes. I too think that the federal government spends way too much money and they mess in things that are unconstitutional. So, create a business that helps to shelter your income. Owning a business and/or rental income property are two of the best tax shelters. And the new tax cuts will help you with that program. Take care of your business interests, that's a full-time job. No, stop. I can't get drawn into a debate over rights. I can't, or for crying out loud. Look, you have the right to do anything you want, so long as you do not directly harm another individual. You live in the United States, for heaven's sake. The states were founded on the argument that your right to your life, liberty, and property are inherent, inseparable, so obvious as to require no further argument. But this is not a statement about politics or government. It is about entrepreneurship. You were born with the right to be an entrepreneur. Probably the inclination to, if my observations of the human condition are worth anything. The only things a government or another person can do to those rights are 1. Defend them, 2. Interfere with them, or 3. Attempt to take them away. Obviously the job of government is to defend your rights, so please do not ask for to be an entrepreneur. I'm having an allergic reaction suddenly. I'm going out to buy 40 copies of The Road to Serfdom and scrub myself with them. It would. Plus it would give you a massive amount of real property to leverage for future endeavors. Also, paying tax on fringe benefits is still cheaper than paying for those items with after-tax dollars. Can either of you separate the noise from this thread? I believe this thread was going notable status. Until a few folks started bringing in personal beliefs or attacks. I was learning a great deal. Thank you, and I am no lawyer or tax attorney, so don't take my word for it. But you've got different taxes. Local, state, federal. Being in Washington, I have to add sales tax what customers buy, but they pay that, so it's irrelevant. I have to pay a percentage of payroll taxes. You could pay workers under the table, but payroll taxes aren't all that much in my opinion. Depends on your industry. The big daddy is the income tax that everyone is worried about. It depends how your company is structured. As a sole proprietor or partnership, then you pay a self-employment tax on all profits, 15.3%. If you have a normal LLC, it will be taxed like a sole prop just the same. The difference comes when you have an S Corp or C Corp, which are taxed as their own separate entities. But as an S Corp, you now become employed by your business. You can now take a salary which must be not unreasonably low. Talk to an accountant to find out the right salary to pay yourself that isn't too low. The rest of the profits are distributed as dividends to the shareholders. Those dividends are tax-free. If you are making 100K plus from your business in profit, you should have an S Corp. Having a C Corp is for big businesses that have many shareholders. If it's just you, there's no need for more than an S Corp. So an example company brings in 200K in revenue, 100K in expenses, 100K profit. It has no employees and is structured as an S-Corp. LLCs can elect to be taxed as an S-Corp. The owner pays himself $25,000 salary and is taxed only on that. He takes the $75,000 remaining as dividends tax-free. So you pay $5 to $8 grand or so in taxes and enjoy the rest. If you make $200,000 and pay it as dividends, then you get the $175,000 tax-free. That's big money. You may have other various taxes depending on where you are and what your business does. But once you're making big money, the tax-free dividends are heaven. Now you just need to grow your profits with investments without paying taxes on your gains. If I'm wrong about anything I said, correct me. I don't have tons of experience, but this is what I've learned from lots of reading and talking with my accountant. Being in a cash industry helps. You can fudge some numbers that can't really be proven and avoid lots of taxes. Not me though. I would never do that. No. No. Yes, the distribution of the $75,000 is tax-free, but you still pay income tax on the profit in the year it is earned, in this case, presumably, the same $75,000. An S-Corp is still a pass-through entity, meaning any income from the S-Corp still flows through to your individual tax return. The biggest tax savings comes from not having to pay FICA or self-employment on those additional earnings. You have to take a reasonable salary for your industry or job. $25,000 with a $175,000 dividend is probably too low and might trigger an audit if you continuously do it. Of course, this is now not that simple because of the 20% pass-through of 2018! A business making $200,000, you would want to pay yourself $56,000. Because 50% of $56,000 is $28,000. 20% of $144,000 is $28,800. You want the lowest of those two numbers to be as high as possible, right? I don't even like winter in Malta. Turns out you have to go far south to enjoy year-round warmth. I was in Berlin a couple weeks ago. Enjoyed it a lot more than I expected to, but damn. There's no way I could voluntarily deal with that freezing cold and grayness several months a year. And Sweden is even colder. It's an interesting learning experience to spend time in a place where things work differently. While the local Maltese don't get to live tax-free, the general taxes here are pretty low by Western standards. Max income tax band 35%, no property tax, no capital gains. The welfare system is almost but not quite non-existent, and the rental market is virtually regulation-free. It's super easy to rent an apartment here. You can view half a dozen places in a day and then just agree privately on the one you like. No credit checks, no bureaucracy and paperwork. On the flip side, if you're late on the rent, the landlord can technically kick you out immediately and you have no recourse. It's all about what you agree in the contract. I believe the two things are related. If Malta had tenant laws like the UK, it would be much harder to find a rental. And I wouldn't be able to see 9 cranes from my roof. And despite the lack of welfare state, I've never seen a homeless person in Malta. Ever. The average Maltese person lives a much more comfortable and worry-free life than the average Brit, even with the low salaries and skyrocketing prices. The homely Maltese chavs are uncouth but harmless rather than the feral and violent British equivalent. You can go anywhere in the country, poor area or rich, any time of day or night, and never have any worries whatsoever about your personal safety. Why? They still have close-knit families and community, churches and charities. People take care of each other, which is how I imagine things would have been in the UK long before I was born. It's a much more natural way of life. I also get full coverage medical insurance for under €500 a year. Much better value than our NHS. Another interesting thing is that it's super easy to get a job here and also super easy to fire people. Not something I've personally experienced, but my girlfriend has. Since they can get rid of you whenever they want, they're a lot less reticent to take a risk on you and see how it goes. It's like a fusion of Mediterranean community or family values and British commercial ethic pre-big government. It works. The Western world is becoming less free. Lots of places are becoming more free. But it's true that there's no new America to run to. Freedom today is found through mobility itself, and/or in small, obscure countries. Yeah, that can complicate things. It's complicated, or as we like to say, it depends. The QBI deduction is not a simple deduction. At the numbers we're talking about here, the W2 limitation is phased in. But overall, the question is the increased QBI deduction times your marginal rate less than the extra wages times the payroll taxes employer and employee, plus any unemployment taxes, etc. Or, additional food for thought, does the lower taxable income from higher wages after factoring in the QBI deduction and extra employer tax expense make you eligible for other benefits that you may not have otherwise qualified for? Does it get you under the cliff for ACA subsidies? Can you get low enough to get the IC? If you're a higher earner, does it get you under the threshold for the child tax credit? This is why it's so hard to give a one-size-fits-all answer to these questions. You need to look further. UAE has no corporation tax except on businesses involved in fuel and gas or subsidiaries of foreign banks. You could set up a business, say, in Dubai or Sharjah or any other emirate of your choice, sell your current business to that business. And then pay yourself a salary that takes you just near the tax threshold. So business pays no tax. And you pay just some personal tax to keep yourself off the taxman's radar. Please seek professional advice though. I am sure you are not the first or last person pondering this question. As a business owner, we are in a fortunate position to have more control over our destiny. Let the salaried people pay taxes. Just my humble opinion. Thank you for correcting me. I was literally looking for a good train wreck meme for a different thread yesterday, so thank you for making this one worth my time. Rep plus, well, if this isn't the most ironic message I've seen in months. You're attacking him for attacking who? He didn't insult any country, nor did he insult any person living in said imaginary country. Nice first post though. Good luck with that. While I'm here, my two is this. When I was 16 and working, I used to love tax time because of my refund. As I got older, I learned to not like it as I was paying every year. Having said that, my life was exponentially better when paying taxes than when not paying them. I believe this is my first post. I would just like to say that most of the advice present in this thread is rather useless for Op, as he is Portuguese, takes one to know one, and our tax system is different from the US. As we don't have federal taxes, etc. I do have to say that it is very traditional Portuguese to want to avoid taxes all. After reading a lot of the nonsense on here and several good posts as well, I thought I'd actually chime in on the topic. Taxation can be a very complicated subject to address, especially when you consider international factors. For example, all countries in the world fall into 4 tiers for personal taxation. Keep in mind, this only relates to your personal taxation based on your residency, not necessarily your citizenship. The situation further complicates, as you may guess, based on your citizenship and residency. For example, a Canadian that spends most of his time abroad may still owe tax in Canada if he has not renounced his residency status, not citizenship. However, if that Canadian renounced his Canadian residency, he would then need to consider how many days he spends in a particular country, any other residency he may have acquired, or possibly other connecting factors or nexus. Further complication this for entrepreneurs would be CFC rules, controlled foreign corporation, subpart F income rules for Americans or U.S. permanent residents, GILTI global intangible low-taxed income rules, Americans and residents, country or state nexus, etc. As I noted in the above post, there are a ton of factors to consider, and aside from searching for a professional in this space, A forum is not the ideal place to get answers because lots of people think they know what to do, but their solution is not necessarily your solution. For example, someone in the thread mentioned setting up a UAE company. Problem solved. Well, maybe. But factors like your citizenship, your legal residency, your tax residency, where you physically spend time, the nature of your business physical location if any, how you get paid, where your customers are located, etc. are all factors that could affect your decision. And that takes more than a 1-minute thread post. Problem solved. Another can of worms in which the rabbit hole goes deep. Perpetual traveler. Roads are primarily funded by fuel taxes. Schools are funded by property taxes. 911 is funded by state and local sales taxes. Each of those examples are consumption taxes, of which you pay when you consume those services. They have nothing to do with the topic at hand of how to minimize personal or business income taxes. Again, none of those services are funded by income tax. It's a common misconception used by those who promote the morality of taxation. The quote in 1927 by Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., "Taxes are what we pay for a civilized society," is often cited by those duped into believing they have a moral duty to pay. Ironically, the average person paid about 3% income tax in 1927 and the highest bracket was a marginal 25%, way below the current tax rate. Prior to 1913, when the U.S. ratified the 16th Amendment legalizing a federal income tax, the U.S. had roads, hospitals, schools and police departments. What it didn't have was perpetual wars, spying on the citizens, and 40% of the population living on welfare. The irony here is that in the Middle Ages, when the tax collector came, the people knew they were being robbed. They paid out of a clear and present danger of direct violence that would and did happen in the event of immediate non-payment. Nowadays people are brainwashed to believe it is their moral duty for the greater good. The weak-minded even argue for the morality of taxation as a higher moral authority. Media is a powerful tool. Why are legal strategies for minimizing or eliminating your tax burden a crime? He is Portuguese, but specifically asked about US tax questions and the IRS. I'll try to get a bit more practical here now. First of all, you need to consider your business and your opportunity. If your business has nexus physical connection to a certain jurisdiction, then you are obligated to pay tax in that jurisdiction. If any. For example, if you own a chain of pizza restaurants in Iowa, you would have clear nexus. You would need to pay payroll tax for your employees plus income tax on your business and your personal tax. If your business is more location independent, then you have more options. Maybe you can move your business to a more tax-friendly jurisdiction. However, you would then need to consider the other factors like your citizenship, your legal residency, your tax residency not always the same, etc. If you have a location-independent business but live in New York City, you will have a federal, state and city income tax obligation regardless of whether your business is registered in Nevada, Delaware or Seychelles. If you are willing to give up your residency status in your home, presumably high-tax country, and live in a Tier 1 or 2 country, then it is easily structured for a zero-tax lifestyle. There are also some more complicated strategies available to strip out profit from your business for tax deferral, but typically the more complex strategies are for higher incomes. I'm not assuming your income, or gender for that matter. Amen, brothers. Nobody thinks in terms of efficiency and productivity of government, waste, etc. They've been zombified by politicians, the bureaucratic class and the technocrats. It's fairly pathetic. It won't happen, but it would be awesome. It won't happen because the income and corporate taxes are what gives leverage to politicians to racket donors. I lost track of the thread when it went full Lord of the Flies, but using cash basis accounting and putting your money in inventory to reduce income tax. Here's what I don't understand. And I'm guessing it's because I'm missing something fundamental. If you buy all that inventory before year end, you increase your property tax when you have to report your 12 or 31 inventory, right? Are you really coming out ahead, or are you just decreasing income tax but getting hit with property tax? Property tax does not exist on a federal level. Do you have a state-specific property tax that you're concerned about? My general experience is that the threshold is high or the exemption is high, depending on wording, and that tax is generally low. Usually property taxes target mainly real property, real estate, and higher value tangible property, i.e. vehicles, heavy machinery, etc. This varies heavily by state. Example, PA does not have a tax on assets, only an income tax. If you can provide more context, I may be able to help out more. So I'm in TX, which is no state income tax but high property tax. I'm so used to working in big companies that I was assuming, but now that you mention threshold, I think inventory value is to be north of a certain relatively high amount before it kicks in. Imagine if all the people who agree with this spill but believe it is impossible suddenly said, "You know what, I'm going to call my congressman about this." Would the scripted A or line "this could never happen" still be impossible? Apologies to all, someone accessed my account without my permission. Let it be known it's not my comment. Though it's a lesson for me to be more careful with my account. I don't think it'd make any difference. Politicians are buddy-buddy despite the show they're putting on. It's like two businesses that are supposed to compete but have some kind of common interest. C.G. prices can't get too low. Their bread and butter is donations from big donors who expect tax breaks, subsidies and other advantages in return. Remove all of that and politicians stop having leverage. Power isn't usually ethical. Sorry for being a party pooper, but looking how Western democracies are evolving, I can't be that optimistic. I think most of our elites have contempt for citizens now. Macron in France. Well, I hate taxes. I understand that taxes are needed for a bunch of fundamental services. I have a now 18-year-old daughter whose life has been saved from our Italian public health system for free when she was 3 months old. Nevertheless, the fiscal pressure here is impossible, and I hate to see rivers of money wasted from public administration, people that often never worked a single day in their lives. I also find unfair see the most struggling to make ends meet at the end of the month, and all these parasites leaving on their shoulders. But here at least we are arrived at a point where we see the state as our enemy and not as our friend. Having said that, I lived in the Principality of Monaco and their rules depends on your citizenship. US citizens, if I remember well, are subject to US tax payment due to a bilateral agreement with the local government, but I'm not 100% sure, and if you are interested please check on the official POM government site. But generally if you spend there more than 6 months you are subject to local taxation, which is 0. You can also set a Monaco-based business. If some of you has some particular question on the subject, I can possibly be helpful. I also have some friends there. Many anti-tax people don't realize that taxes also pay for roads, rule of law, a military to keep invaders from plundering your business because there's no protection, etc. etc. In Canada you don't pay taxes if you're self-employed and make less than $20,000, I think. Somewhere around that figure, not sure how that applies including the states. I definitely don't recommend reported zero income. Looks fishy. You clearly haven't read the whole and most interesting part of this thread. Admittedly, no I haven't, haha. Good afternoon. I'd like to throw in my 2 on your post, for you and anyone else interested on this subject. Firstly, it has been well argued that all income tax acts are entirely unconstitutional. It does not matter if you live in the US, Canada, UK, Australia or New Zealand. In fact, I suspect income tax acts around the world are all built following the same statutory guidelines. Aaron Russo's America, Freedom to Fascism documentary is a must-watch, if you haven't seen it, as it shines a light on a perspective most people are not even aware of. Food for thought if you will. You've certainly heard the rich don't pay taxes. That's the job of the working class and the uninitiated and/or the ignorant, right? Or so it seems. How is this achieved? By hiding money and/or income overseas and in other countries? Maybe for some. Does it work? Again, maybe for some. The IRS has tentacles all over the world, so I would recommend you really educate yourself before you take steps, because you might unknowingly be stepping into a field littered with landmines. There are many ways of avoiding the tax man. Some are nonsensical, others very plausible. Let's look at a fun, hypothetical scenario. Meet John. John is looking to protect his wages from the tax man. In fact, John wants to protect his income from everyone, including lawsuits, angry spouses, and yes, the strong arm of the tax man too. John knows his wages can be levied and taken away from him. John is a pretty smart guy. He was lucky to learn asset protection strategies by a friend of his, nicknamed Red_Cents. As a result, his car is in a trust. His home is in a trust. His dog is in a trust. He owns nothing. Nothing of his can be taken away from him, as he literally owns nothing. He could get married and divorced without worrying about his ex-wife taking half his stuff. Probate can't touch his estate if he dies. Everything goes to his beneficiaries. He's got some great trustees and sleeps well at night. John decides to have his wages 100% levied by an entity he owes money to, for work done in the past. A contract is drafted and the appropriate steps are taken with the employer. Now John received nothing of his wages. They are sucked up before any deduction is taken out. John has to borrow money from the entity or another entity and goes further into debt. His wages now can never be touched because they are already 100% levied, and he makes nothing, year after year. As he lives, he borrows more and more, effectively growing the debt he owes to the entity. What taxes are to be paid if he takes nothing home? Food for thought. With all this said, I would invite you to consider new ways at looking how money flows through your life and finances. Anytime your legal name shows up in the public somewhere, it is a potential liability to you. I would advise to own nothing but control everything. A book I would recommend is The Art of Passing the Buck Volume 1. It is a peek into how private legacy trusts are set up by the rich to avoid taxes, protect assets, and pass everything they work for on to their children. Red_Cents. In the spirit of this discussion and my dismay surrounding the resurgence of the eat the rich sentiment in the USA, I need to recommend this book. It may be a little off the beaten path, but it is absolutely fascinating. Let's talk about taxation without representation. Who is representing the wealthy when we are talking about 75% taxes and retroactive wealth taxes? The poor. The 99% argument really kicks the left in the ass on this one. What about any progressive taxation? We are dangerously close to a voting majority that doesn't pay any taxes. Is democracy really the answer? I am starting to wonder. What if countries had to compete for our residency? Unless laws are equally applied to everyone, I am starting to think we are doomed to go down some pretty ugly paths as a nation. Step 1. Acquire a large portfolio of undervalued rental properties in appreciating areas. Make sure you're timing the market to be near the end of the slump phase of the real estate cycle so you can buy once values have dropped. Step 2. During the recovery phase of the cycle, property values will be increasing. Either renovate to add value or simply hold since you bought them at a discount while renting them out to cover expenses. Step 3. During the boom phase of the cycle, the values will be at peak. Cash up on your properties by refinancing or getting home equity lines of credit on all of your now appreciated properties. You now should have access to hundreds of thousands of dollars even. And because it's considered debt, you won't be taxed on this money and can spend as you wish. Step 5. Make sure to lower your rents or increase expenses to show a loss on your properties to avoid paying taxes. Step 6 optional, either move back into your parents' house or move to Vietnam to make the money stretch until old age. 1. Number 2. Make more money. 3. Buy investments that allow you to divest most of your tax burden while building your net worthy, MF real estate. If you are a US citizen, one option to explore is moving to Puerto Rico, although there have been some people pushing to change the laws there, so who knows how long it will last. But if you get in before these tax incentives change, you are grandfathered in through contract with the GA for something like 20 to 30 years. This is from my own research. I am not a tax professional, so you would have to do your own research and consult a tax attorney who knows PR laws, but the basics as I understand them are: 1. Move a business to the island and pay only 4% in tax. 2. If you move yourself to Puerto Rico, you will pay 0 in capital gains. 3. If you set up a bank or hedge fund, you will pay only 4%. 4. Other options. Residents of PR do not pay US taxes, only the local taxes of PR, such as those listed above. This is the only place in the world as far as I am aware that this is true. If you live in any country, you have to report your income and pay taxes back to the US when you exceed 100K in personal income. Of course, to do these things you must personally spend 183 days or more in PR each year. There may be some other option to this as well, like not being on the mainland US for greater than 50% of the year due to living in PR and travel to other countries. I have thought about but not vetted this idea, because I have no immediate plans to live to PR. You can find a lot of information online. Here is one of many to start with. Random page I found by a quick Google search, but there are tons if you just search Google also. It is not smart to try to evade taxes doing anything questionable or illegal. But there is nothing wrong with structuring your life and making decisions to reduce the taxes you pay. Heck, moving from one state to another can have profound impact on this. I personally value being a US citizen at the moment, so to me the PR option is the only viable solution if you are wanting to have very, very low taxes. What do you guys know about Puerto Rico? This is very interesting to me, especially considering the hedge fund thing. For that matter. What about the Virgin Islands? Beyond my expertise, I defer to I focus within the 50 states. Once we get past that, I have to bow out. The thing is, the US was never intended to be a democracy. The great men that founded this nation were well aware of the perils of democracy. Even to this day the US is technically a constitutional republic, however, the law of the land has been subverted. It's ironic that the 13 colonies that revolted against Britain are some of the most liberal and heavily taxed states in the nation. Once again history repeats itself. At Gilman pretty much nailed it. You do need to show significant connection to PR to make this work. If you move your business there, you need an office and employees. Not just virtual office. Basically you get a 90% federal tax credit at corporate level. If you pay yourself via dividends, you pay 0 personal tax as long as you live there. Sent from my VTRL 29 using Taper.org. I was just about to post this. Lol. A constitutional republic, legally solidifying the rights of the individual, was one of the greatest achievements in the history of man. Unfortunately, it's been completely shafted and the US is on course to become more of a theocracy. That's pretty great. I wouldn't mind living in the Caribbean anyways. I'd happily make it my primary residence and totally comply with that. Do either you or know of any good resources out there that would enable me to really educate myself on this particular plan? Beyond the obvious of just Googling, is there any way you can explain it a little more? At first you agree with him, but then you recommend using a different method than what he seemed to be making look like the better one. If that makes sense. Lol. It's a timing issue. If you buy the inventory this year, and sell it next year, you're just manipulating when the cost is recognized. Manipulate in this sense is not intended to be negative. This means at some point, you can expect a large reversal. What happens when you get to the end of 2020? Need to buy $3 million in inventory to bring your cash basis income to $0, but you only have $2 million in cash from any number of reasons: delayed payouts from holiday sales, taking distributions from the company, etc. Now you've accidentally recognized $1 million in income. Think of the effective tax rate on that. Assuming I'm US-based, and have to pay taxes at some point, I'd rather pay for several years at lower rates than in 1 year at a high rate. This is personal preference. I've been reading up on this a lot lately, and I have not gone back to reread the thread, but some clarifications. You can only really use cash basis for taxes as a retailer if your financials are cash basis. If you are using accrual basis for financials, i.e. recognizing COGS when item is sold so you can evaluate profitability, and tracking inventory on your balance sheet, then it's difficult to get away with. I should go back through my responses here to make sure I haven't made any claims otherwise. Okay, thanks for the explanation. So, if you had the cash, it does seem like the better way to do it. If it's as simple as the example the guy showed year after year. More profit in the end. Same. I have reached out to several law firms at this point and awaiting responses. Had a few recommendations from friends on this front. Will let you know if I find someone solid to deal with. Spoke to a guy I was referred to today. Feel free to reach out for his contact info. Really learned a lot from the conversation and I'm sold on the idea. 4.2% tax rate locked in for 20 years with Act 20 plus no capital gains with Act 22. How is this for real? I'll be starting the process in the next 30 days. Pretty incredible that this is even an option, and I feel dumb not looking deeper into it after told me about it last year. No more hesitating and not waiting on the laws to change. Curious how this would work under Act 20. I'm incorporating a new service-based business and PR looks like an option, aside from still paying Social Security or Medicare or whatever at 33% on my personal salary. I'd like to see how to get around paying this personal tax. Seems like there's two possible options but both seem sketchy. Number 1, take zero salary and pay via dividends or owner's draw at 4% corporate level. Number 2, pay dividends to a holding company at 4%, then transfer dividends to personal. Is it even possible to set up a new corporation like this and still be compliant? At the very least it seems you can pay yourself what's considered a reasonable salary by their standards. Nothing I've found specifies a minimum salary amount. All the guys I know doing this just pay themselves a dividend, no salary. Sent from my VTRL 29 using tape.Talk. Pardon the ignorance. How does that work? Set up a PRC Corp, and have accountant pay out dividends to shareholders me every quarter? Seems it'd be problematic if it looks like you're taking dividends instead of salary to deliberately avoid taxes on work you do for the corporation. Curious to learn at what point the IRS says it's okay for you to take dividends based on XYZ criteria like limited involvement, etc. Maybe the answer is don't take a salary for a few years, retain all the cash within the business, and by the time it runs itself without your involvement you can take dividends without the IRS batting an eye. This has me in a bind. For this new company I won't be paying myself anyway so we can have more cash on hand to grow, but I also don't want it to look like we're taking unfair advantage of Act 20. Not sure if it's legal to pay no taxes but you can certainly offset corporation taxes in places like Cayman Islands. You still need to declare the income from any offshore entity to your home country. It's the most beautiful idea ever. Really, it's beautiful. If it was the same today, I wouldn't even think about it. I'd take a flight over to you guys and do anything to become a proud American. Democracy is a tyranny of the majority. Please stop. Sent from my VTRL 29 using tape.Talk. Honestly, you need to talk to a PR attorney. I am not an expert on Act 20. All I know is that I have several friends and clients who went the PR route and only get personal income through dividends. I think as an attorney contact sent from my VTRL 29 using tape-a-talk or user. Yeah, just on the point of the salary question, to maintain compliance with Act 20 you do need to take a reasonable salary. That is in its current form. They have changed Act 20 several times since 2012, so that may have been added more recently. Other things that have changed is you only need one employee on the island at all times, could be yourself if you're the owner, versus 5 minimum, which was a previous requirement. As for the specifics on how much is a reasonable salary, that is going to depend on a lot of different factors from what I have heard. Will report back as I learn more. No taxation without representation. I'd probably seek advice from a tax attorney or some qualified expert that could help you come up with an optimal strategy that's specialized to your location, your customers' locations, and the services or products you sell. Like others have mentioned, there's likely no easy one-size-fits-all solution. I wish I could help you more, and I too am highly interested in paying less taxes. But, I think you'd need to share more information with an expert and get a more direct and personable response. Hey Tom, where are you at with this? Are you in PR yet? I looked into this last year and couldn't find a way around being on the island for half the year, so that's a bit difficult, though not impossible since I'm in FL anyway. Do you mind shooting me your lawyer's contact info? Thanks to everyone who tried to keep the thread on track. It was exhausting reading through the heated comments while trying to get other people's experience with cash and accrual-based accounting.